Warning: O5 approval required. The file you are attempting to access is available to personnel with Level 4, 4001 clearance only. This clearance is not included within General Level 4 Security Protocol. By scrolling down, you acknowledge your consent to exposure to a known cognitohazardous image. Scrolling down without proper inoculation will result in serious consequences. Attempting access beyond this point without clearance is grounds for termination of Foundation employment and cancellation of all educational, medical, retirement, and mortality benefits. In the event of incapacitation, or worse, by the cognitohazard below due to lack of inoculation, and thus an attempt at unauthorized access, this console will become inoperable, and automated viral agents will disable access to your Foundation account, bank accounts, social media, emails, and any other aspects of your online identity. In the unlikely event of survival, security personnel will be dispatched to detain you and escort you to a secure site. You will be interrogated under truth-extracting mimetic agents, then likely terminated. Consider yourself warned. 10. There's a space between your eyes. 9. There's a silence between the words. 8. There's a smell you cannot detect. 7. There's something beyond what you know. 8. There's 9 more to go. 5. What lies beyond? 4. What is not? 3. Does the black moon howl? 2. Are you sure you want to know? 1. Your final chance to look away. Look away. Look away. Look away. Exposure to cognitohazard has begun. Exposure continues for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Continued consciousness confirmed. Retrieving file. Welcome. Alexandria awaits. Item number: SCP-4001. Object class: Safe. Special containment procedures. SCP-4001 is secured within a reinforced concrete bunker disguised as a warehouse, constructed for its concealment in the city of Alexandria, Egypt. The block surrounding the warehouse has been purchased by the Foundation, and the buildings upon them are currently rented out to a number of businesses and private individuals to help maintain the facade. All civilians and non-cleared staff attempting to enter the warehouse are to be turned away. All civilians and non-cleared staff found within the warehouse are to be detained, interrogated, and administered Class C amnestics. The use of lethal force if intruders prove non-compliant is authorized and encouraged. Multiple fail-safes are built into the bunker, including automated guns, gas weaponry, collapsible floors, cognitohazard presenting screens, and a tombstone, a 300-ton load of impure iron laced with thermite charges set directly over the tunnel to SCP-4001. The tombstone is a tool of last resort. Detonating the charges would flood and seal the tunnel with molten iron, severely delaying access to SCP-4001 and allowing response teams time to assault and recapture the location. In extreme cases, the load of iron would also serve to protect SCP-4001 from damage if nuclear detonation of a location becomes a tactical necessity. In the event of a large hostile assault against SCP-4001, all available teams are to be deployed to defend SCP-4001. Additionally, the deployments of SCP-Blank, SCP-Redacted, SCP-4000 and SCP-4000 Redacted to defend or recapture the premises is authorized. Entry to SCP-4001 is restricted to Level 4 and above researchers with permission from the O5 Council. Open flames are strictly forbidden within SCP-4001, as are firearms or bladed weapons of any kind. Writing utensils of any kind can only be brought within SCP-4001 with a majority vote with the O5 Council. Breach of these conditions could result in a CK-class restructuring scenario or an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario. Description: SCP-4001 consists of a tunnel leading down into an antechamber connecting to a staircase which descends 15 meters below ground. Titanium and tungsten security doors have since been constructed within the antechamber. The staircase emerges from a tower into a large room stacked with bookshelves. Attempted to dig into SCP-4001 from outside have resulted in digging past its expected location, indicating that SCP-4001 exists within an extra-dimensional space. The tower itself terminates 12 meters above the ground rather than appearing to connect to any roof. The room does not conform to Euclidean geometry. It is possible to walk in any one direction and eventually return to the point of origin. The room is 312 meters in width of indeterminate height. While SCP-4001 lacks a roof and plentiful space above the shelves, the non-Euclidean geometry means that it is impossible to ascend to a height greater than 25 meters above the ground, with further attempts to increase in altitude resulting in remaining at the same height. And the tunnel is many hundreds of kilometers in length. Under appropriate lighting conditions, or with the use of vision aids, it is possible to see oneself in the distance by looking in the appropriate direction. The room is filled entirely with bookshelves. Each bookshelf is 2.8 meters in height and 100 meters in length, all neatly aligned with 2 meters of walkway space between shelves. An 8-meter wide main walkway originates from the staircase and runs in both directions, the full length of SCP-4001, with identical modern-style couches situated every 20 meters along the main walkway. The repetitive nature of the geography means it can be easy to lose one's location within SCP-4001. The only otherwise distinct structure within SCP-4001 is the tower from which the stair descends. Every fifth bookshelf has an electric lamp installed, which are the only light sources within SCP-4001. At most of the space within SCP-4001 is poorly illuminated. No power source has yet been identified for the lights. The floor is covered entirely in a sturdy carpet. Individuals standing within the room will hear steady, ruffling noises, and on occasion, loud, thudding noises. The source of the sound is the origination of bookshelves and the new books upon them, which occurs continuously with no obvious source of material. New shelves appear at an approximate rate of 1 every 16 hours, with several new books appearing each second. SCP-4001 represents the complete, accurate archive of every human life to date, and is continuously self-updating. Every human being that has ever lived has a single corresponding book within the archive, detailing all important events in their life. This includes human-born SCP instances, though no book pertaining to a non-human being has yet been located, with the exception of SCP-4001-2. As humans are born, new books corresponding to them are added to the archive. Each book is identical in size and thickness, approximately the size of a standard paperback novel, though the number of pages vary depending on the individual's lifespan and the breadth of accomplishments. The exact dimensions of every book, regardless of number of pages, is 12 centimeters by 20 centimeters by 2 centimeters. Each book is completely accurate in its contents, and thus SCP-4001 represents an unprecedented intelligence resource. Books are stored in order of individuals' births, and the spine and the front cover of each book is inscribed with the name of those it refers to. Each book is written in a language which is unlike any existing language known to the Foundation, while simultaneously being completely comprehensible to any literate individual being reading it. The total number of books is estimated at approximately 120 billion. Each bookshelf is double-sided, each side holding 8 rows of 5,000 books for a total of 8,000 books per shelf. SCP-4001 stores 3 shelves in a line before returning to the same point, thus keeping some 240,000 books per walkway. At 2.5 meters from one walkway to the next, one thus passes almost 1 million books for every 10 meter one walks along SCP-4001, or 100 million per kilometer. At last estimate, SCP-4001 is well over 1,000 kilometers in length. Books can be taken from the shelves and read freely. Books can be scanned, copied, and photographed without consequence. If returned to any of the shelves, the book will vanish and reappear in its original location within the archives. Any attempt to remove a book from the archives results in the book vanishing and returning to its shelf. The contents of the book represent the absolute truth and history of the individuals contained within. Altering the contents of the book has a corresponding retrocausal effect upon reality, with memories, locations, physical structures, physical states, and even complete existences changing accordingly to alterations applied to the books. Writing a decision, meeting, reward, change in personality, change in feeling towards individuals, change in health, method of death, or any notable achievement or life event into a book will cause that event to transpire for the appropriate individual at the first possible opportunity. Discovery. SCP-4001 was first encountered by Foundation staff in the year 1800 redacted after it was discovered by an archaeological dig under an old part of the city. The Foundation quickly isolated the location and administered amnestics to the archaeologists involved. The Foundation continued to operate the dig site for a few more months, occasionally pretending to find some pottery or bones in order to avoid drawing suspicion. Initial forays into SCP-4001 were done cautiously, since the extent of the room was not fully understood. Once researchers realized the contents of the archive and the basic nature of the books, advance teams were sent with supplies to place flags at locations of interest. Since the bookshelves are not marked nor distinguishable in any way, 17 days after the beginning of the expedition, the first advance team encountered a living individual within SCP-4001, designated SCP-4001-1. The individual referred to himself as the Watcher of Alexandria Eternal. The Watcher had survived within SCP-4001 for nearly 2 millennia. See Addendum 4001-1. There are currently 7 camps within SCP-4001, each with its own generator, water filters, and beacons to aid in locating it, since it can take many days or even weeks to walk between camps. It is highly recommended that any attempts to foray within SCP-4001 are done by bicycle, with supplies of food, water, and a backup sources of electricity, though the ambient temperature and lack of humidity means that heat sources are unnecessary. SCP-4001 Camp Locations. Base Camp. Located at Base Camp. Persons of Interest, New Births, and Shelves. First Humans. Camp B. 20 kilometers. Due to continuous expansion of shelves in the intervening space, these values are steadily increasing. First birth in the year 2000. Camp C. 130 kilometers. Persons of interest, Albert Einstein. Camp D. 250 kilometers. Persons of interest, Leonardo da Vinci. Camp E. 4,030 kilometers. Person of interest, Charlemagne. Camp F. 600 kilometers from base camp. Person of interest, Marcus Aurelius. Camp G. 970 kilometers. Person of interest, founders of Ur. Note, if found walking forward from base camp to G, the distance is approximately 200 kilometers. The oldest of books are currently estimated to correspond to human births, dating back to approximately 75,000 years ago. None of the books contain references to dates, with very few referencing named locations, making identification of specific locations or time periods difficult. Such books, if entitled at all, are entitled with positions within society rather than proper names, such as Firebringer, Hunter, Chief, Mother, or Friend Killer. Regardless of age, all books appear to be in the same condition as the newest of books. Analysis of the earliest books seem to support the human population bottleneck theory. The theory dictates around 75,000 BC, the Toba supervolcano in Indonesia erupted, with severe impacts in global climate. The theory states that it had catastrophic impact on the burgeoning proto-human population. Genetic analysis suggests the human population fell as low as 5,000 breeding individuals in the few millennia following the eruption, with modern humanity showing unusually low genetic diversity as a consequence. No other possible cause for the bottleneck has been identified. The vast majority of earliest books represent individuals completely disconnected from those found in other books. As many as half of all books within the archive lack any names or titles, with many more books simply being titled The Baby or The Infant, with the book detailing the short life of a baby who died before they can be named. Researcher note: due to exponential rate of human population growth, I am recommending we establish new camps every decade or so from this point. Otherwise, the degree of reliability in terms of delving the archives in person is liable to be compromised. Also, I'm recommending we install and maintain a small electric monorail within SCP-4001 to facilitate ease of access, or come up with other practical methods of assistance. There has to be a better way than having to ride with food and water for weeks to find one person's records. Dr. Lincoln Abrams, Archive Manager. Addendum 4001.1 Interview Log. The following interview was conducted with SCP-4001-1, the man found living within 4001, now known as the Watcher. Initial processing of the Watcher proved difficult, since he spoke no modern languages, and no Foundation staff on site could fluently speak Ancient Greek. The interview was performed within SCP-4001, since the subject's extreme age had left him quite infirm. The interview has been translated from Ancient Greek. Interviewer, Dr. Gabriel Kodaopoli. Interviewee, SCP-4001, The Watcher. For the record, this is Dr. Gabriel Kodaopoli, Foundation researcher and anthropologist, interviewing an unknown man found within SCP-4001. Switches to Ancient Greek. Greetings. My name is Philosopher Kodaopoli. I am an anthropologist. I study ancient civilizations. A philosophical scholar? Or a tomb robber? You know not the danger of this place, invader. If you disturb the shells, you will be cursed. A little of both, to be honest, though I am no invader, and I seemed to be fine reading the book so far. Do you have a name, SCP-4001-1? Why have you disturbed Alexandria? And who are you with? The Romans? The Coptics? The Hebrews? I am with a group known as the Foundation. We preserve and protect unusual things. We keep them safe and prevent them from being dangerous to mankind. You are not with the Roman Republic? No. The Roman Republic collapsed some 1400 years ago. 1400 years? Surely it has not been so long. How long have you been down here? Who was the last ruler? I do not know how long. I have not seen the sun nor the stars since I entered. The last I remember, there was unrest about the new queen, Cleopatra the Seventh. Cleopatra the Seventh? That's some 1900 years ago. 1900 years? That is unfathomable, Invader. Impossible. The Watcher is silent for a few minutes. You say you have read from the shelves and partaken of the sacred knowledge? Yes, I have skimmed over a few of the books. We realize what this place is and what it represents. The team that encountered you was searching for the book of someone famous and planning to establish some bases in here. You have read the sacred text and not have been judged? Perhaps your incursion is not a violation. My name was Theopolis. I am the Watcher of Alexandria Eternal. She is the most important thing in the world. Alexandria Eternal? You mean this place? Yes. This is our greatest resource. A record of eternity. All that has ever been since the very dawn of man. A gift from the gods to us. Which gods? All of them. The gods of the Olympus. The gods of the Nile. And maybe even that god of the Hebrews. How long has it been here? I do not know. There were people here, watching over her when Alexander came and built his city over her. We kept ourselves hidden, eventually had the library built over her, an archive over an archive. Only a few of us knew of the secret door that led down here. We passed the knowledge on to the worthy. Not even the pharaohs knew of this place. By the time I was born, she had taken over the name of the city she hid underneath. I do not know her true name, though I have searched long for it. How did you come to be down here? I took instruction under the previous Watcher, after demonstrating my affinities with the library above. Though I suspect that's not what you meant. No, it's not. The Romans came on their ships. They came and burned in their conquest, and the flames spread to the library. I retreated within here. Excuse me. I must attend to myself. The Watcher pauses and pulls a scroll out from within his robes. Delicately unrolling the end of it, he draws a sliver of metal from within his robes and pierces the end of his right index finger and proceeds to write a sentence in his own blood onto the scroll before rolling it up and stowing it again. My apologies. Now, the flames. I'm sorry, but what was that you just did? Given myself yet another day. Another day? You can use the books to make yourself immortal? No, I am not immortal. When the Romans came and the library began to burn, I retreated within here for safety. I heard the sound of the rumbling as the library collapsed upon her, and I could not muster the strength to dig my way out. I was trapped. How did you survive? Is that scroll mine? Yes. In the days that followed, I did not lack for warmth or water, since we kept a few jugs down here, but I began to hunger. Before a moon had passed, the water was drunk, and I was starving. In my desperation, I found my scroll and wrote myself back into health. I quenched my thirst. I sated my hunger. I've used my scroll and my blood. cured every disease, every infirmity, and bought myself one day. Whenever I feel the void drawing me, I add another line to my compendium to stave off the eternal rest for just a little longer. How did you find the will to continue? She needed me. She must have a watcher, someone who walks her aisles, who appreciates her texts, who lets her know she is loved. She speaks to me sometimes when I wander from the light. The library speaks to you? She leaves me messages in my scroll, whispers to me in the dark, and makes notes of her whisperings for my perusal. What does she say? She tells me to wait, so I have waited. I walked her end to end, many times over. I have read accounts of lives, some simple, some glorious, some beautiful, some ugly. I have waded through the changes. All of her scrolls, bar mine, became bound tomes, and these little books, as you call them, her torches and sconces turned to candles, now to these strange oil-burning lamps, as you call them, and her woven benches became these leather-bound and pressed oddities. I waited for so long, waiting for someone to show up and tell me my task has not been in vain. The watcher falls briefly silent again. Tell me, philosopher, who is the pharaoh now? There is no pharaoh now. Cleopatra was the last before the Romans conquered Egypt. Egypt has not had a pharaoh since. The Roman Empire grew and collapsed, and out of her ashes multiple empires rose. The Spanish, the English, the Dutch, and so on. Are they great empires? They are great, though they are not good. I see. That is perhaps true of all empires. Even great Egypt was not a place of kindness, nor were we able to stay the advance of Rome. We were so proud in the city. Alexandria was a great city, and her library was the envy of the world. But no one, but us, understood the true greatness she hid beneath her. Perhaps if we had just... No. I have pondered that alternative many times, and it would never be what she wanted. Philosopher, what do you intend to do with this place? My task is to keep it safe, to discover its mysteries. To use her? Perhaps. Cautiously if we do, and only if necessary. I've already read some of the books, and I understand their potential. These empires you speak of, they must never find this place. They would exploit her without thought. We are taking steps to ensure it remains hidden. Good, good. Philosopher, would you do me a kindness? I can make no promises. I would simply like to see the sky again. It has been 1900 years since I have seen the stars. 1900 years since I have seen the sun. It is eternally dark down here. There is no roof but the black void, and what light she gives us barely stretches the length of a shelf. I shall make a request to my superiors. Thank you, Watcher. Notes. The Watcher was granted permission to leave SCP-4001. With the assistance of Dr. Koto-Opoli, he was taken up the stairs to the surface on a clear night. He spoke briefly with Dr. Koto-Opoli, during his time on the surface, and he died shortly after sunrise, and he was buried in a small grave outside the city. Dr. Kodopoli maintains that he spoke of nothing of consequence in his final hours, and has not been persuaded to divulge otherwise. Addendum 4001.2 Testing Logs. All tests were authorized and overseen by senior researcher Dr. Waylon Hendricks and the assistance of Dr. Avon Travers. Test subject D0546, a healthy 35-year-old male. Procedure. Book pertaining to D0546 was located. Pen was used to write the phrase, "lost all hair," in the book on the last page. Result: D0546 started shedding their hair, becoming completely bald after 75 seconds. D0567, a bedridden and disabled 27-year-old female, crippled 3 weeks prior to the test. Book pertaining to D0567 was located. Pen was used to scribble out the line "back painfully broken while fleeing SCP blank." Line located on last page of book. D0567 suffered a slight nosebleed and headache. After 150 seconds, D0567 sat up and exited their bed. D0567 does not remember their injury and demonstrates ongoing symptoms of amnesia. Test subject redacted. A book pertaining to redacted was located. Pen was used to write the phrase "suffered heart attack and died" in the book on the last page. Redacted reported dead in the newspapers the next day, having died of a sudden heart attack. Archive Manager Abrams explicitly forbade the use of SCP-4001 to terminate life after this test. Dr. Hendricks was admonished and disciplined, requiring to submit all experimentation methodology to approval before continuing experimentation. D0120, a healthy 22-year-old male or female. Procedure. Book pertaining to D0120 was located. Pen was used to amend the phrase "hearty and loud baby boy born 8 pounds 6 ounces" to "hearty and loud baby girl born 8 pounds 6 ounces. Line located on first page of the book. D0120 suffered a severe nosebleed and headache, as did 26 Foundation staff, including all researchers involved in testing. D0120 flickered in and out of existence briefly, their appearance shifting from that of a young man to a young woman, before stabilizing and falling unconscious. D0120 was administered first aid and Class A amnestics. Notes from Dr. Hendricks. D0120 has since shown gender dysphoria, continues to identify as a male, and has requested genital reconstruction surgery. Approved by the Ethics Committee. Test subject D0245, a 45-year-old male with a history of sexual assault. Book pertaining to D025 was located. Book pertaining to Maria Jimenez, blank years of age at death, was located. Pen was used to scribble out line "callously stalked and brutally redacted and slowly redacted Maria Jimenez." Line located on second last page of book. Result: D0245 suffered a severe nosebleed and headache, as did 7 Foundation staff, including all researchers involved in testing. D0245 then disappeared, leaving no physical evidence behind. Both books had also immediately disappeared, returning to their place upon the shelves. Details of the books after the edit had changed. D0245 was later tracked down and found to have died 3 years prior in a violent altercation. Maria Hermes has found to have died in a car crash 3 days after the event originally happened. Notes from Dr. Hendricks. Her untimely death is unusual here. Possible Schmidt-Lerman effect in play? The Schmidt-Lerman effect is the tendency of retroly caused altered timelines to replicate events from the original timeline far more closely than would otherwise be expected under the butterfly effect, presumably to avoid catastrophic chronological paradoxes. Test subject: researcher Dr. Claire Williams, 32, suffering from third-stage lymphoma. Book pertaining to Dr. Williams was located, and pen was used to write the phrase, "was spontaneously cured of cancer," on the last page. Dr. Williams showed immediate signs of recovery and better health. Notes from Dr. Henricks: lymphoma symptoms returned 7 months later. Test subject: Henry Adams, a fictional man whose life story was written into a book matching the style of those within 4001. Procedure: book pertaining to Henry Adams was collated, then inserted into the shelf inside SCP-4001, pertaining to the expected location for his chosen birth date. The book detailed an ordinary life and healthy constitution, completely lack of any connections to any historically, politically, or culturally significant figures, and culminated in a line explaining his appearance within SCP-4001. Result: a semi-opaque red-haired man appeared in SCP-4001, showing signs of disorientation. After 3 minutes, he curled into a ball and began rocking back and forth before vomiting blood. Meanwhile, the book placed on the shelf rapidly began adding lines, detailing multiple tumors, mass organ failure, and instances of necrosis all across the body. Henry Adams died 110 seconds later, confirmed by the line in the book, died horribly, agonizingly, and justly from his organs doing what they were always meant to. 24 hours after the book was added to the shelf, it disappeared and has not been seen since. Note from Dr. Henricks: we are not trying that again. I am deeply wishing this place had its rules posted clearly, like every other damn library in the world. Also, are the books mocking us, or just me? Test subject: D0900, a healthy 22-year-old male. Procedure: book pertaining to D0900 was located. D0900 was given a lethal dose of morphine and expired after 45 minutes. Immediately upon the line, died through cruel and unnecessary morphine poisoning appearing in the book. The phrase, "the morphine disappeared from his system, resulting in spontaneous resuscitation," was written after it. Result: D0900 coughed violently and regained consciousness. D0900 was administered Class B amnestics. No behavior or physiological consequences were noted, though D0900 tested lower on cognitive tests after the experiment, possibly due to damage caused by anoxia to the brain. Test subject: D0989, a 43-year-old female killed in an SCP-682 containment breach 3 days prior. Procedure: book pertaining to D0989 was located. Pen was used to scribble out the line, "fatally struck and torn in half and crushed by a rampaging monster." Line located on the last page of the book. Result: D0989 appeared immediately in D-class quarters. D0989 did not respond to any questioning regarding their state of being or memories, nor did the application of Class A amnestics result in any change in demeanor. D0989 suffered from severe headaches for 8 days afterwards, and showed moderate disorientation for a further 15 days before committing suicide. The only words spoken by D0989 for the entirety of the time period were, "Send me back. Let me go." Test subject: Dr. Claire Williams, 33, suffering from second-stage lymphoma. Procedure: book pertaining to Dr. Williams was located, and pen was used to write the phrase, "was spontaneously and permanently cured of cancer and all other diseases," on the last page. Result: Dr. Williams showed immediate signs of recovery and better health. Note from Dr. Travers: Dr. Williams has remained in remarkably good health for 2 years before mild lymphoma symptoms returned. She's going to need to keep doing this, it seems. Test subject: D0323, a 29-year-old male killed in an SCP Blink incident 28 days prior. Book pertaining to D0323 was located. Pen was used to write the phrase "returned back to life" on the last page. D0323 immediately appeared in the D-Class quarters, suffering some cerebral hemorrhaging. D0323 died 13 minutes later, with such information being confirmed within their book. Test subject: D0310, a 36-year-old male killed in an accident during routine construction duties 2 days prior. Procedure: book pertaining to D0310 was located. Pen was used to write the phrase "returned back to life in full and proper health, free from all infirmities, physical, physiological, and psychological" on the last page of the book. Results redacted. As a consequence of the damages sustained at Site-85 resulting from the experiment, Dr. Hendricks was demoted and removed from duty at SCP-4001. Overseer note: as of redacted date, all testing related to the resurrection of the dead through any means is strictly forbidden. For all its potential, SCP-4001 does not enable us to bring back the dead, though it can act potentially as a short-term lifesaver and a long-term life extender if other options are voided. Never forget, there are limits to just how much we can mess with chronology. Addendum 4001.3 Cataloging Assistance System. On redacted month and redacted date in the year 1900 and blank, a team of researchers and engineers led by Dr. Abrams completed the development of a simple AI and 2 corresponding robotic bodies, with the intention of compiling a complete record of the estimated 120 books within the archives, and making and acquiring specific books within the collection simpler. Dubbed Marvin and Molly by Dr. Travers, they were originally set to the task of compiling a database by scanning every name on every book within the archives, a task they took little over 12 years to complete. As well as collating data on every book, the Cataloging Assistance AI also located 3 skeletons, T human and 1 equine, located deep within SCP-4001, some 38 kilometers past Camp C. Initial teams seem to have missed the skeletons, presumably because they were located in the dark areas of shelving. Based upon clothing analysis of the supplies, they entered SCP-4001 sometime in the 4th century BCE. Currently, Molly is permanently stationed adjacent to the Camp A boundary, adding new names to the database as they appear. Marvin acts as an aide to a staff, and if requested for a specific book, will locate and collect the book for staff, usually within a few hours depending on the distance needing to be traveled. Marvin has had wings installed on his body, and his programming updated to enable flight at up to speeds up to 250 kilometers an hour within SCP-4001 by flying above the shelves. Note: on redacted month and redacted date in the year 2000 and redacted, staff discovered a book entitled Marvin and Molly. After reading the book, the decision was made to temporarily remove the robots used in the catalog assistance system, whereupon the book disappeared 24 hours later. The robots were returned to 4001 the next week, and the book reappeared in its original position, containing the line, "Marvin and Molly returned to their true place of belonging, undoing the cruelty and callousness of their departure." The decision has been made to designate Marvin and Molly SCP-4001-2 collectively. Researcher note: we're a tight little group down here in the dusk. It's not hard to get lost down here. It can get pretty lonely, and we rely on those 2 more than we care to admit. They're very much considered a part of the team. My best guess is that Alexandria considers them honorary librarians of a sort. You feel like they almost have personalities some days. Dr. Avon Travers, the archivist. Addendum 4001.4 Incident 4001-F. On redacted date, redacted entered SCP-4001 and requested that Marvin collect a specific book for them. They had received appropriate clearance to enter the site, but not to perform any experimental procedures. 7 hours later, 43 other Foundation staff suffered from nosebleeds and complained afterwards of severe headaches, prompting a response team to enter SCP-4001, whereupon Redacted was found standing alone in the shelves, disoriented with a nosebleed and a book at their feet. They were escorted from the premises and detained for questioning. The book in question referred to one Dr. Junifer Peters. The contents detailing a number of successful missions within the Foundation and multiple promotions to the rank of Redacted, as well as a romance, falling out, and eventually a spiteful rivalry with Redacted. The first page of the book had been torn out. An immediate attempt to repair the book has been made using materials on hand, a needle and a spool of thread. The attempt was temporarily successful. An unidentified woman appeared spontaneously in Foundation headquarters, flickering in and out of visibility, and alternating between confusion and disorientation, and then screaming in panic. She disappeared after a 3-digit number of redacted hours, and has not reappeared since. After the incident, Foundation records were searched, and no documentation related to Dr. Junifer Peters was found, nor could any Foundation staff ever recall meeting her. Researcher note. A reminder of the following incident, the SCP-4001-F. No non-archivist personnel, no matter how highly ranked, is permitted to be alone while in the archives. All it takes is one nut job to tear out one early page, and all of human history breaks. Dr. Lincoln Abrams, the Archive Manager. Addendum 4001.5. On redacted date, clearance was granted by the vote of the O5 Council for an attempt to explore below the floor of SCP-4001. Carpet knives, axes, and a jackhammer were brought within SCP-4001 under careful supervision of the archivists, and a patch of carpet measuring 1 meter by 1 meter was cut from the floor near base camp. The carpet was raised without difficulty, revealing a concrete floor covered in a layer of ash. Under the advice of Archive Manager Lincoln Abrams, the ash was sampled, the carpet was replaced, and the exploration attempt was aborted. Subsequent carbon dating of the ash suggests it be between 70,000 and 80,000 years old, and spectrometric analysis of the ash results suggested it resulted from the burning of wood and paper. Further testing performed at randomly selected locations within SCP-4001 suggests that the ash is located beneath most, if not all, of the flooring of SCP-4001. No records within Foundation archives or SCP-4001 itself describe a major combustion event within SCP-4001. Researcher note. I spent more than half of my life down here in these shelves, and will likely spend the rest of it in here as well, as did my dozen or so predecessors. I've always been aware that within here lies potentially the greatest tool for the Foundation's success, and the greatest weapon for the destruction of humanity, as has everyone else who has stepped into these hallowed halls. Old libraries tend to develop personalities of a sort, inviting and cozy, majestic and regal, aged and dusty. You must know of what I speak. This one, though, is unique. It has power, and it doesn't let you forget that. It permits us to fiddle with some of its rules while harshly reminding us when we get out of line. Anyone who's read any of these magnificent volumes can't help but realize that the library has a personality of its own and passes its own judgments upon the actions of those whose lives are interred within. Waylon, after you went and did all those experiments, where you pulled those books from their shelves and wrote all of them to mess with the lives of those beneath you, I went and had a look at your book. I saw what the library wrote about your actions. I saw how it expressed its disdain for your attempts to play God, to rewrite reality to our will. I saw its disgust for all of your sins. Yes, Wei-Lan, I now know every dirty little thing you've done, but more importantly, so does this place. It considers you arrogant and looks down upon you with far more disdain than I could ever muster. And yes, I've read my own book too, and Avon's, and the book of nearly everyone who has worked down here. On the whole, I consider the plentiful judgment levied upon myself and the rest of us fair. The library judges not just actions but intentions, and it knows intimately how much the rest of us care for it and how much we've tried to ensure it isn't abused. Never forget that this place is permitting us to be here, and never forget to respect it, lest Alexandria could doom us all. Dr. Lincoln Abrams, Archive Manager, the Watcher of Alexandria Eternal. Alexandria Burning. An ending. The end began with the supervolcano. The Eastern Isles were a tropical paradise and a thriving nation before the eruption. Then, after a few weeks of tremors, the largest volcanic eruption in over 2 million years launched thousands of cubic kilometers of molten earth, ash, and dust into the atmosphere, and rained hellfire upon a terrified population. Within days, the former paradise was an ash-ridden wasteland, and within weeks, hundreds of millions would choke or starve to death. And the organization ignored this. While the event had been catastrophic, they dealt solely in unnatural matters, and while millions had died, billions needed to be threatened before they would lift a finger. But they did watch the superpowers. The Eastern Isles had been a superpower, and a nuclear one at that. There were others. Avalon, the Tundra States, the Western Republic, Atlantis, each of whom offered support, while secretly expressing relief as their stricken rival slowly collapsed and died. The ash cloud spread over weeks, bringing with it an unnatural winter. What crippled one nation would cripple the rest. It became very clear, very quickly, that agriculture was a pointless affair in these conditions, and the food reserves were going to run thin. The organization ignored this. Truth be told, the superpowers were an inconvenience that they had to negotiate with over far too many petty details. They had their own methods of resource acquisition, and besides, this was not an unnatural matter. International tensions ran high, and border skirmishes occurred, first against allied states, and then against the superpowers themselves. Soldiers clashed as each state scrambled to acquire the resources it needed to protect its population. People died in agony while seeking to acquire the most basic of necessities, and the organization ignored this, at least officially. While the organization, as a whole, had formally distanced themselves from the rest of humanity's plight, individual researchers and staff were concerned. Their families had been provided for, but their safety was still in question. And more than one researcher had made a proposal to the council requesting intervention. Silver Rain de Alanti, the chief archivist of the Archive Eternal, had made her arguments clear. From where I stand, the impact upon humanity has never been clearer. It is not something that I can see with my own eyes, nor touch with my hands, but something I can hear as clear as day. The very rhythm of humanity has been changed. I am used to the sound of new lives entering the archives, a steady rhythmic drumming of sorts, a thrumming thump resulting from the echoes and geometry of the archives, the sounds of new books dropping onto shelves as sure as a heartbeat. I am sure that the archive itself smiles to hear the steady sound, and to personally manage the flow that a smooth tune is maintained. I now hear the arrhythmia of humanity. What was now a steady heartbeat is now a sputtering and uneven sequence of thuds. It sounds sick. It sounds ill. Such a drop in the birth rate is a sign that humanity needs our intervention, now more than ever. We exist to protect humanity from the supernatural, from the arcane, and from the unreal. But our duties are not set on stone. And our failure to respond to this threat, a threat from the system of itself, will doom us all. Chief Archivist de Atlanti, Watcher of the Archive Eternal. She was not pleased by the lack of response. She was awakened a few days later by the blaring of a klaxon. Down in the archives, a regular day-night cycle was seldom adhered to, since the permanent twilight and reclusive tendency of the archivists meant that people tended to keep to a schedule that favored them personally. She rolled over from her bed and slipped on a robe and stepped out from her small quarters into the hub that was home base. As chief archivist and watcher, she managed to convince the organization to construct small living quarters down for her in the archives. Not that modesty was needed. She was the only personnel down here, and well past the point of caring. Most people were by the time they reached their second century. The klaxon blared from a humanoid figure made of plastic and titanium, one of the organization's AI constructs, given physical form so it could assist the archivists more directly. Silver Rain walked up to it and smacked a button on it for attention. "Scouter, cease the alarm. What's happening?" "An XK event is imminent, Chief Archivist. All sites are entering lockdown. Personnel are advised to seek shelter." "An XK? How? What breached containment?" "All containment is currently secure. However, scanners have detected a large amount of high-altitude, low-orbit activity. It appears that the automated response systems have been triggered." "Automated response systems? In response to what?" "Nuclear launches." Silver Rain paled. "Scouter, how many Halo objects have been detected?" 9,212 at last count." Silver Rain forced the panic to subside. She could freak out later. "Where are the other archivists?" "Currently in the bunker on the surface." "Tell them to come down here." "This will not achieve anything, Chief Archivist. All sites are in lockdown, including this one. The way is shut. The archives cannot be accessed." She ran for the stairs, feet pounding up them two at a time. She wasn't exactly sprightly anymore, and she felt a lot older than she looked, but she could still manage to keep a quick pace. Knees aching, she hammered on the locked steel door and mashed buttons and shouted for her people. A knock came back in a muffled voice. Logic kicked in, and she ran back to the stairs to the hub. "Scatter, patch me through, now." The AI opened a video channel. On the view screen, she could see the face of her fellow archivist. Falling Star, with his pale hair and wrinkled skin. Northern Wind, with her pale skin and straight hair. And Dawn Dew, with her dark complexion and patient eyes. They looked as worried and scared as she knew she did. She forced herself to stay calm. "Falling Star, situation report." His voice came through clearly, but she could hear it breaking. We're stuck here with the lockdown. The bombs are falling. The western capital is gone, as is the bulk of the Republic. The southern monarchy has been wiped out." He paused. Atlantis is gone. We saw the blast over the sea from the window." Silver Rain forced herself not to cry. "From what we can tell, the satellite system is going to fail soon. Too much interference." "Have the Council sent orders for a response?" "The Council is gone." "What? How?" "Spite, we think. One of the superpowers included us in their targeting. They're hitting our sites. Most have gone dark. Is the contingency secure? Falling Star looked stricken, and Dondu stepped into the center of the camera. It got hit by one of the bombs. It's gone too. Silver Rain felt another stab of panic in her chest. Look, just stay undercover out there. We'll wait this out. Once lockdown finishes, we can find a way to fix this. In the background, another alarm blared. Scouter, what is that? The proximity alert for an airborne threat. Her archivist looked through at her. Falling Star was close to tears, and Northern Wind had already succumbed. Dondu forced a smile. Don't worry, Chief. You've got the archives. You'll find an answer. She leaned in close. Remember, Chief, we all eye the sky split, and the ground rumbled, and the solid steel door buckled. Silver Rain paused for a moment in shock. Numb, she sank to her knees. Behind her, she heard a single thump of a last new book, and then utter silence. She filled the silence with her sobs. She read the new book. It was painfully short, and as were the rest. She trawled deeper into the archives, picking out books at random, desperately searching for a book which continued to update, searching in vain for a book which didn't end abruptly and pointlessly. Vaporized instantly by an atomic blast, died agonizingly from radiation poisoning, vaporized abruptly by an atomic blast, shattered pointlessly by atomic shockwave, crushed painfully beneath collapsing fallout bunker. Dead, 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 dead. She made a decision. Scouter, collect my book. The AI paused to access its internal map and then broke off in an inhuman sprint between the shelves. It returned half an hour later, cradling the book in its arms. It passed it to her. I do hope you are not considering anything rash, Chief Archivist. No, not yet, Scouter. I'm just going to need this. She knew that her basic idea was probably crazy. It was based solely upon rumors from watcher to watcher. She instructed Scouter to wait well away from her, and wandered into a dark part of the archives. She remembered the first lesson she had received during her initiation here, almost a century ago, fresh out of the academy. They were very similar to the last lesson that she had received from the previous watcher almost 40 years ago before his retirement. The archives were alive. That much was clear. There was a vast consciousness in here somewhere, and it had a moral compass of sorts. As such, each archivist was taught to respect and care for the Archive Eternal. And it wasn't uncommon for archivists to speak openly to the shelves and books. What they didn't teach you on your first day was sometimes the shelves spoke back. If you went into the darkness and waited and listened, then you could hear the whispers. Whispers so faint as to be incomprehensible to the ear, but there were other ways of deciphering their meaning. She sat down to meditate. Her glasses would enable her to read the text, even the lowest of light if necessary, and it was never cold, so she was almost comfortable for the first time in days. She spoke into the darkness. Her voice was hesitant, almost a whisper. I don't know what to do. She felt a wave of emotions hit her. It was a painful thing to admit. Am I the last one left? Am I alone? There was silence for a long time. She sat patiently, fighting the urge to fidget, knowing that there was no other option ahead for her. She was almost dozing off to sleep when she heard the sound of wind. On the wind, the hints of a voice. It was slow and soothing, and motherly. She could hear what almost sounded like words, but were either too soft for her ears or in no language she could decipher. She opened her book and turned to the last page. The last few lines painted a stark picture of her current mental state. She ignored it and focused on the line that mattered. In the darkness, she heard a voice speak. "You are the last. You are almost alone. What do I do? How can I fix this?" Another whisper in the wind. In the darkness, she could hear a voice speak. "It cannot be fixed. It cannot be repaired. Can't I find the person who started all this and try to undo it?" There was a long wait, and minutes, and then hours. In the darkness, she heard a voice speak. "The weight of history is heavy. It is far too late, and too many consequences have fallen. The dead have gone to death. Can I create more people?" In the darkness, she heard a voice speak. "You are a woman." Yes, then, but can life recover from this?" In the darkness, she heard a voice speak. "No, not to its former grandeur. Besides, those you have kept caged are no longer so." She felt despair fall. It was over. They'd done it. The world had ended on their watch. And it wasn't even a monster or a curse or an angry god. Just the monstrosity of humanity. And done so in a way which couldn't be fixed. No amount of science or magic could repair the devastating amount of radiation which now permeated the atmosphere and the ground. Nor could a ragtag bunch of survivors possibly manage to recontain the evils that now wandered the ravaged globe. It couldn't be repaired. Could it be undone? There was only silence, and it did not answer. She returned to her room the next day, and slept, and woke, and read, and slept, over and over. Her rations began to dwindle. She would have lost track of time if not for Scouter. He tended to her needs as best as he could, but the subtleties of human despair were lost on him. And then after 7 days and 7 nights, a whisper. Silver Rain quickly opened her book. In the darkness, she heard a voice speak. "Yes, there is a way to undo history." "How? What have you thought of?" The voice on the wind was but a sigh. In the darkness, she heard the voice speak. "The unthinkable." She understood, barely. It went against everything she had ever learned and everything she had ever valued. It was heresy, pure and simple, but the object of her devotion was telling her this. I would have to break history? How large of a retrocausal event would we need? In the darkness, she could hear a voice speak. "The only way to save the world from the failures of your species is to extinguish all trace of them." She went to say, "I can't," but the words caught in her throat. There was no choice here. She could, and she would. "But what will you do without us?" In the darkness, she could hear a voice speak. "Start anew. Write a brighter future." That would do. She could trust the Archive Eternal to know the answer, even if she didn't. Scouter? Yes, Chief Archivist? Bring me the fuel from the generator. All of it. Chief Archivist, what do you plan to do? What is necessary, Scouter? Security override. Shut down all ethics and personality protocols. Authorization Camper Actor Stand Richter 9091. Scouter stood up a little straighter, and the usual cadences of his voice were muted into a monotone. As you instruct, Chief Archivist. He walked away and began to gather the fuel reserves. I'm sorry, Scouter, but you won't like this. She poured gasoline across the shelves and ran lines of it up through the corridors. She thoroughly doused the first and the oldest shelf. Most books here were nameless. A few bore titles, evidence of an exemplary individual, and she stroked her hands fondly along the ancient shelves. She took a piece of wood from her bed and splintered it, and dipped it in the gasoline. And she ordered Scouter to dismantle his arm and use it to generate a spark. Holding the burning torch in one hand and her open book in the other, she stepped into the shelves. I wish there was a better way than this. I wish we had done better. A whisper, almost familiar this time. In the darkness, she heard a voice speak. I know, but you know better than to wish. Will it hurt? In the darkness, she heard a voice speak. Briefly, but it will not take long. I meant for you. There was a brief but noticeable pause. In the darkness, she heard a voice speak. Yes, it will. In the darkness, she heard the voice speak again. But thank you, Watcher, for your care and your devotion and your concern. I will require but one last service of you. Tears filled her eyes. She had to be strong now. Will you remember us? There was a pause. Then the last whisper could be heard on the wind. It was barely audible, and it was not but loving. In the darkness, she heard a voice speak. No, but I will remember you. She placed her book upon the gasoline-soaked shelves and touched the flame to it. There was a burst of heat and light, and then a burst of pain, and then nothing. The end of Homo nobilis took mere seconds and many long millennia, and when history stopped screaming in pain, they had never existed. A beginning. There was smoke on the horizon, a lot of smoke. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant warmth and safety. The female carefully climbed to the top of the hill, gathering scraps of reeds and grasses as she went. Short and stocky, she was nonetheless an excellent scout. Besides, most of the males had died on a recent hunting trip after a clash with another tribe, and their tribe had been forced to survive, leaving behind many of their tools and their campfire. She wound the thick clump of grasses around a thick branch and tied them on with reeds. While crude, the torch would serve her to bring the fire back to the rest of the tribe, where it could be nurtured and kept. Crouching from her viewpoint, she could see the waters for the sea far beneath her, and the source of the smoke. It seemed to originate from a cave, high above the sea. The previous thick clouds were dying down to a small trickle of smoke. She considered her options. They needed fire, and she might need to move quickly to get it. but if it was another tribe, she could be in serious danger. The need to provide for her family overrode her other instincts. She couldn't see any other tribes, nor any signs, nor anywhere else. She gathered her spear in one hand, makeshift torch in the other, and set off down the hill. The cave was deeper than she first thought. She half expected a pile of burning wood to be sitting in the mouth of the cave. Instead, the smoke curled up from deep within. She pushed deeper in, ducking low to avoid breathing the smoke. She paused and passed carefully, silently through a narrow passage, and stepped into a large chamber. It was vast, so vast she could not see the far walls, and it felt wrong. Nothing in particular stood out, but she felt uneasy. If she could articulate so, she would describe it as a room filled with pain. But she could only see the smoke all around her. The whole place seemed to be smoldering, with a thick layer of ash coated the floor. Here and there she could see thin fragments of white material with black marks on it. It seemed to burn well, so she used it to quickly light her torch. The flame took a little coaxing and care, but soon sputtered to life. And then there was a rumble near her. A stone pillar rose from the floor, brushing aside layers of ash. She instinctively recoiled in fear and brandished her spear. The pillar stopped rising once it was a little taller than her, and the room was silent again. The feelings of pain seemed to have subsided, replaced with care? Comfort? She approached it carefully. There were markings all over the pillar. She leaned in closer to see more clearly and held up the torch. A thought arose. Not markings. Pictures. She could see the outlines of her kind, standing upright. She could see images of them gathered around and doing different things. She saw images of a baby near the bottom of the pillar, and those of an adult as she studied it up from the floor. She somehow had the understanding that many of these images were of the same figure. There was a flicker of movement in the corner of her vision. A new image had appeared near the top of the pillar. An image of a figure holding a torch before a stone pillar, crouched in caution and curiosity. Next to it, there was an outline of a handprint. She raised her hand to place hers within the space and found it a perfect fit. Language was not something she had experienced, nor much in the way of cognitive thought, but an idea as clear as the blue sky entered her head. This is me. A spark of inspiration struck her. She reached down to the ash and coating her finger in it, and began to draw, crudely with indistinguishable stick figures in a childish manner. But the meaning behind it was clear. She drew figures in a circle, and food around them, and other figures fleeing from them. Satisfied that her work was done, the Firebringer left the cave and stepped into a brighter future.